When a giant crocodile appears near a small town in Sudan, villagers can quickly determine that something's wrong with it. It moves extremely slowly, and the belly looks unnatural. In an attempt to save it, the animal was cut open, revealing the stomach contents. But once it was exposed, no one could believe what was inside. How did the crocodile find this in the middle of nowhere? Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he slowly approached the giant crocodile. He knows he's supposed to be the brave one, but he could barely contain his nerves. But Michael knew what he had to do. His mind was made up. He wanted to save this animal. With surgical precision, the crocodile's stomach was sliced open, after which its contents were immediately exposed. Michael gasped on the floor. How was this possible? But was Michael in time to save the giant crocodile? And what did he find inside it? And why did he even feel the need to try to save this dangerous creature? They often avoided each other as much as possible. Children of local villages are taught from an early age to stay away from the area where crocodiles are most likely to be. Nothing good can come from a face-to-face confrontation. At least, that's what everyone always assumes. But one fateful day, Michael did something that no one in his family would have allowed if he had told them this beforehand. Michael decided to ignore all the warnings he had received over the years in the name of what he thinks to be the greater good. Michael is a 38-year-old man who's lived in a small town in Sudan all his life. This is also the place where he met his wife, with whom he started a family. The village is near the Nile River, and Michael's family has a small farm where they can produce enough food to support themselves almost 3 times over. Michael is perceived as an amazing person by the villagers, but he also has a reputation for another notable personality trait of his fearlessness. His family in particular knows this better than anyone else. Animals or people from nearby villages with bad intentions can make a day much worse at any time. But Michael has always faced these risks head-on, and he has some scars to show for it. Most of the time, Michael was successful in his actions, and the town loved him for it. You could almost say he was their unofficial leader. And that's why when this particular situation arose recently, everyone turned to Michael to decide what to do next. Now, even though the small village was close to the Nile, they did not have to deal with water threats like crocodiles or hippos often. They mostly stayed in the river. The villagers also knew not to get too close to certain stretches of the river. This way, they avoided danger. Up until today. Today, one of these dangerous creatures had ventured far beyond the riverbed. This had never happened since Michael had lived in the village. That the animal had come out of the river was already a problem, but there was more. It positioned itself in one of the worst possible places. An absolutely enormous crocodile with as big a belly as any of the villagers had ever seen crawled out of the river. And there was a big problem. It stood in the passage the villagers had built to let water flow from the Nile to their farms. The crocodile was blocking almost all the water now, which meant that their crops were not getting enough water. This could become a big problem, especially if the crocodile stayed here for a long time. This wasn't noticed right away, but the village would discover the problem soon enough. Some women were going to the river to wash their clothes. There, they saw the giant creature. They were in shock, but then they discovered something. After taking a better look, they saw that the crocodile was blocking their water supply. The women immediately turned to Michael to find a solution. Michael immediately sprang into action. There was no time to waste. With a couple of other men from the village, he went to check it out. It quickly became apparent how complicated this situation was. The women had already told Michael how much trouble the animals normally seem to have when coming out of the river. Moving the crocodile on its own was not an option either. Even if it was too lethargic to move them or hurt them, it was still a big risk. And on top of that, this specimen seemed too big to be left out. Many options were discussed amongst the villagers, and one of the most prominently suggested ideas was to kill the animal and have everyone help move it after that. Now, from an early age, Michael was taught the value of life, and killing this abnormally large crocodile would be an unnecessary waste in his eyes. He could not accept that. Besides, He'd also noticed something when examining the animals from a bit of a distance. Michael had seen many crocodiles in his day, and from the way this one was acting and looking out of its eyes, he could tell it was very bad. He wanted to help the animal. He felt he had to do something. Michael couldn't let the animal suffer like this. Fortunately, Michael knew exactly who to contact about this problem. A couple of weeks ago, a visitor had come to town to discuss with them how they dealt with problems related to wild animals. This was very helpful now. This man could help Michael save this giant crocodile. The man was a wildlife conservationist and had tried to convince them to avoid killing large and rare animals as much as possible, and if they really had a problem, they should call him first. So, that's what Michael did. He called the man for help. The wildlife conservationist named Jason had come to the Sudan from the UK and was tasked with preserving the lives of rare animals as much as possible. He knew there were many of these animals around Michael's village. When he heard the story about the apparent giant crocodile near the small village, he was very excited to see it. Now, the villagers could not wait that long to get their water supply working again. They needed to do something new. And with the news that Jason would not be able to make it in time, the idea of killing the crocodile was back on the table. Not only would it provide a quick solution to their problem, but it would also give the villagers some extra food for the next few days. Jason begged and pleaded to let the animal live, even promising to send some extra food parcels to the village as a reward. Many villagers felt like ignoring Jason's advice and going ahead with their plan. But there was one person who heeded Jason's words: Michael. Michael was already determined to save the animal, but now he knew he could also strengthen his connection with the people who could really help bring long-term positive change to the village. Michael had been trying to bring about this positive change for a long time. This was the ideal opportunity. Killing this animal would be great in the short term, but this is how Michael thought of the situation. Michael's a person who can monitor situations well and thinks about the long-term consequences. There was a reason he was the unofficial leader of the village. After convincing the village, some reluctantly agreed with Michael. But now that they'd decided to save the animal, one big question remained: how? Jason could only be in the village in 2 days. That would take too long. They had to think of another solution. Jason knew a lot about big game animals, but he also knew when he needed a specialist to advise him. That was now. He knew who to talk to in this situation. He got the leading veteran in the United States on a line for a video call with Michael. This way, they could show her the animal, and hopefully she could advise them on what to do next. Michael began to walk around the animal, filming it, so that the vet could examine it as best he could. He did so very carefully. It was still, after all, a potentially deadly animal that they were trying to save. The connection between Michael and the vet was very poor. Fortunately, this was not a problem. Despite the poor connection and the poor quality of the camera, the vet was able to quickly determine what was likely causing the animal's problems. She tried to explain it to Michael as best she could. After taking a good look at the crocodile, the vet was able to quickly identify what was probably wrong with the animal. Its stomach had a very unnatural protrusion, and because of where it was located, the vet determined that something was probably blocking the entrance to the crocodile's stomach. Most likely, the crocodile had swallowed something it could not digest. This could be making the animal very sick, and could explain why it could not move. It simply had no energy left. But what had this crocodile swallowed? And what could Michael and the other villagers do to solve this problem? The veterinarian informed Michael that the only way they could save this animal was to remove this unknown object from the crocodile. Someone would have to carefully cut the crocodile and remove the object. Now, this was a very dangerous job, so who was going to do it? Michael told the other villagers what the veterinarian had said. He felt the eyes of everyone in the village immediately on him. And he knew that none of them were going to be willing to take this risk, and he couldn't blame them one bit. Michael would have to cut the crocodile himself. No one else would do the job. Fortunately, he managed to convince the other villagers to help contain the crocodile. This was very important for Michael's safety. They returned to the village to get the necessary supplies. The villagers gathered many things: ropes to bind his mouth and cloth to put over his eyes. They also planned to fix its body to the ground by pulling ropes over the animal and then fastening these ropes to the ground. This was to ensure that the crocodile could not move. The villagers had returned to the crocodile and began to tie it up according to the plan. It was quite an operation, but the crocodile hardly put up any kind of fight. Yet more evidence of the bad state it was in. When Michael felt it was safe enough, he got to work. The vet was still on the video link, and another villager filmed Michael so that the vet could give him instructions. This way, Michael knew what he had to do to save the crocodile. With a knife that had first been placed in the fire to kill any bacteria, Michael made the first small incision. Fortunately, the crocodile barely had any reaction to this, and Michael didn't have to go very deep to find the obstruction. After 2 more cuts, he was able to access the stomach. The object that was trapped in the crocodile was immediately pushed out of the hole. Michael could hardly believe it. Out of the crocodile came an old blue soccer ball. He hadn't seen it coming. He was very confused as to where the crocodile could have found this. No one in his village was missing a ball. There was no time to wonder about this now. Michael followed the vet's last instructions. While he was doing this, some villagers went to get some older fish for the animal to eat so they could lure it out of the stream. When they returned, the animal was already released from its ropes. Michael was already on the phone with Jason to tell him the good news, and was immediately promised that his village would spend a load of extra food and supplies as a token of appreciation for the effort. Everyone in this village was overjoyed when Michael told them the good news. Michael had risked his life for this effort, but everything had worked out in the end in the best possible way. His village was much better off than before.